We will now introduce our special guest speaker, Lourdes Trofeo. Today we have her. She graduated from La Puente High School in 1984. From there, her journey took off, graduating from Cal Poly Pomona and CSU San Bernardino, and eventually took a job that placed her in New York for over 22 years. However, little did she know that waking up and going to her work on 34th Street in Manhattan on September 11, 2001 would forever change her life. She is here today to share a little of that fateful day. Ladies and gentlemen, Lourdes Trofeo.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I would first like to say thank you to Dr. Lopez, Mr. Perez, and to also Stephen for inviting me to speak with you all this morning. It's truly an honor to be part of this ceremony. As I said, or as she said earlier, my name is Lourdes Trofeo, and I'm a proud 1984 La Puente High School graduate. I'm so glad to be back at my alma mater, though I wish it were under different circumstances. I've been invited today to speak about my experience at 9/11 because I was there. I lived in New York City metro area from 1998 to 2020 and worked in Manhattan for most of that time. I was working on 34th Street, 3 miles north of the World Trade Center. My office was located at the top where I had a clear view of the Twin Towers every day. My parents were in town visiting and was scheduled to fly back to California on September 12th. I was scheduled to be on vacation until they left town. However, I decided to go into the office on September 11th. I was at my desk at 8 a.m. but planned to be at the World Trade Center Tower 2 by 9 a.m. that very morning. The first tower hit at 8:42. Thankfully, I was still in the safety of my office. Almost immediately, we were evacuated and alerted that a plane had struck the World Trade Center. I could see the smoke billowing at the top of the tower. We were immediately evacuated as it was thought that we were under attack from the sky. New York City went on lockdown immediately and suspended all public transportation. To give you a little perspective, New York City, Manhattan, is an island that is 22 square miles. And it's estimated that 4 million people are in this city on a typical weekday. 2/3 of that are daytime workforce commuter who now have the daunting task of finding their way home without public transportation, and that included me. At this point, I was hearing that it could take 5 to 10 hours to get home, either by walking or by ferry. By 3 p.m., I made my way to the ferry slip on foot. There were thousands of people walking, unsure of really where to go. I saw people covered in ash, I'm sure feeling lucky to have escaped and be alive. I also saw random acts of kindness, people comforting one another and helping truly those who were in distress. Some were handing out bottled waters or whatever form of relief. I saw firefighters running towards the tower carrying what must have been 100 pounds of gear. At the ferry were thousands of people patiently waiting. But that orderly line soon became a chaotic and panicked people stampeded towards the entrance. Fear of being trampled, I stood frozen when a nice gentleman grabbed my hand and said, "Come on, I'll run if you run," and pulled me toward the entrance. Before I knew it, I was home and collapsed in my mother's arms and sobbed. The weight of the day pulled me in deep despair that I could do nothing but cry. From October to December, feeling helpless, I volunteered at the soup kitchen outside of Ground Zero, where we served meals to volunteers that were helping clear up the debris. I befriended a police officer who took me inside Ground Zero, where I saw a pile of mangled steel and debris. I couldn't believe it. I was inside staring up at this monstrous, unrecognizable structure. There are no words I can use to describe being inside Ground Zero, but deep sadness, anger, bitterness, and hopelessness are among a few. A few years later, I would find myself employed by Cantor Fitzgerald as Vice President of Human Resources. Cantor Fitzgerald is a Wall Street firm and the largest trader of US government bonds. They were located on the North Tower of the World Trade Center, occupied 101st to 105th floor. Sadly, out of almost 1,000 employees, nearly 700 died on 9/11. They make up 25% of all the people who died in both towers, the most lives lost of any one company. I was part of the rebuild at Cantor Fitzgerald, and I'm happy to say they are thriving today. They've set up the Cantor Relief Fund to help their families, and they continue to do so today. There's no escaping that horrific day for me, the memories of that horrific day for me. Every year around this time, my heart is heavy and anxiety starts to set in. So I try to focus on humanity that I witnessed that day. How complete strangers helped one another when faced with atrocities. How resilient we are as Americans when evil tries to rob us from our freedom. Thank you for allowing me to share my story with you today. Thank you for honoring the nearly 3,000 people who sacrificed their innocent lives. Please continue to pray for their families who still feel the unsurmountable loss, and let us all never forget this day and what it means to us. Thank you. Nestor Chevalier was a friend of mine, and he worked at Cantor Fitzgerald during 9/11, and as well as Mike Miller, who is my husband's family's friend, who they grew up in Connecticut, and was also ironically working for Cantor Fitzgerald.